Welcome to the BriteVibe podcast. At BriteVibe, we believe everyone deserves to be happy. But in today's world, everywhere you turn, there is division and negativity. At BriteVibe, we have created a global movement to bring 8 million people together who are inspired to live bright, live bold, and share bright vibes. Alone, it can be hard to change, but together we can change the world. Welcome to the BriteVibe podcast. Dr. Gloria, is it Dr. Gloria Mark? Do I call you Dr. Gloria? Because you got a PhD. So is it Dr. Gloria Mark or Gloria Mark?
You know, you can call me Gloria.
Okay, Gloria.
We're friends.
Okay, well, welcome to the show. We're so happy to have you on the show today. I love the topic. So if you're just tuning in to the show, stick around. We're going to have a fun topic today that I'm super excited about. And I know we're going to have a very good conversation today. But I did want to read some of your bio because I don't understand it. And I want you to clarify what it is. So I'm like, I love this. I've never heard some of these big words before. So I'm like excited. So one, it's Gloria Mark, PhD, which, you know, that's the doctor designation. But it says Gloria Mark is the Chancellor's Professor of Informatics, if I'm saying that correctly, at the University of California, Irvine. So I just wanted to read that first part. Now, you received your PhD from Columbia University in psychology and studies the impact of digital media on people's lives. And that's kind of our little cliffhanger. That's our little digital media on people's lives. So that's why I think it's so relevant today. And you take a deep dive in examining multitasking. You've got a book out, which we're going to talk about. But what's let's just start with a chancellor's professor, because I've not actually heard that term before. So, but I'm not an academic, so I'm sure if I was smarter, I would know. But enlighten me. What is a chancellor's professor? And then we'll even get into what that other stuff is. But what's a chancellor's professor? What's that mean?
So it's a special designation.
Okay.
So it's an achievement.
Okay.
So it's something I'm very proud of. Basically, we have different kinds of professors. You have an assistant, associate, full, and I was at the full level of being a professor, and then received this designation as chancellor's professor.
Chancellor. It sounds like some type of military designation. Chancellor.
Well,
you're the chancellor.
The head of our university is called the chancellor. Right.
Okay.
As opposed to president. Some universities call it president.
And so a chancellor's professor is just you're a very accomplished professor, and it's kind of a designation in the line of professors, right? That's why because I've never been in a chancellor's professor's class, because I never made it that far. So that's why I don't know what the heck it is. But then let's go to the next one. So that helps me on that. So informatics, never heard of the word. Am I saying it right?
You are, and I knew you were going to ask me about that.
Of course, it's in your bio. It's fun.
So my department is very interdisciplinary. And, you know, computer science used to be just about hardware, software, and theory. But computers have entered our lives so broadly. It's in every aspect of our lives. If we really want to understand the effect that computers have on our lives, we have to take this very broad view, and we have to look at it from perspectives of psychology and sociology and communications and even art and anthropology. And so our department is comprised of these, you know, people from all these different disciplines. And the thing we have in common is we're really interested in the role of computers, their effects on people, and also looking at design of computers and how those affect people. So it's really about people and computers.
And so, and that's the definition of that, informatics.
Yes.
Okay. So so informatics is about how people and computers kind of integrate, or how they work together, or how their relationship. Right.
That's
so
right.
You would be like an informatics psychologist for computers and people to learn how to get along. This is like marriage counseling, right? So you visit with the computer, and you visit with the live person. Now, this is how this makes you feel. But it's really the study of the psychology of how these things interact.
That's right. Yeah, okay. That's exactly right. And I'm trained as a psychologist.
Right.
And so I use a psychological perspective when I'm studying how people use computers.
Fascinating. This is fascinating. So, and we're going to get to the book here shortly, but I also understand from our previous conversation that you didn't necessarily start down this route of being a psychologist. You actually started in a much different field, if that's correct, right?
I started out in fine arts. So
Yeah.
my first degree was a Bachelor of Fine Arts.
Uh-huh.
I studied painting and drawing. Never thought I would do anything else. I was just really committed
Uh-huh.
to art. But then, I discovered how hard it was to make a living as an artist. And
Right. Especially while
to
you're alive. You
yeah,
die, you can make good money, but live, right? That's hard
that's
to do.
right. That's right. And, a lot of people who were just so extremely talented were taking on other jobs, other
Mhm.
day jobs to support their art. And I realized very quickly that that life wasn't for me. I loved art. I mean,
Mhm.
I'm just, so passionate about it. But I thought, I want to do something for my day job that I'm also really passionate about.
Mhm.
I don't want to be working something that's completely unrelated. So, I also was pretty good at doing math and science. And I thought,
Mhm.
well, I could do something else and still make a living. And so I eventually went into psychology, but I realized, after being in psychology for a while, that my art background had so much value to me because I learned how to be creative. Art teaches you what's called lateral thinking, to be able to really think out of the box, to, you have an
Right.
idea over here, an idea over here, you find some connection, come up with something completely new. And this kind of thinking is something that, you can use in any profession. You
Mhm.
can use it in science, you can use it in business, and it's just so useful and so valuable. And so I realized that it ended up being a great combination.
Yeah, very cool. And I agree, business and in life in general, creativity is what makes things better, right? It's what makes things change, right? And so you have this book, and we're going to talk about this quite a bit today, but it's called Attention Span, Finding Focus, Fight Distraction, a groundbreaking way to restore balance, happiness, and productivity. And obviously that's super relevant for what we're going through today. And then, so I'd like to talk about the book for part of this part of the show. And then I would like to talk about kind of your thoughts around AI and what's happening with Chat GPT and some of these other
Mm,
platforms that the major companies are rolling out, and kind of what you are the subject matter expert in this space. And so I
mhm.
would really like your intake, kind of your opinions on what this AI, because I think that they connect it to the internet or will in April or something's what I've heard, maybe, right? And so I'm really curious about that too. But first, let's get into the book about attention span. It's everywhere. It's like a pandemic. It's like a pandemic of a shortness of attention. Man, you say in your book that it basically 45 seconds is about as long as anybody can stay on a page on
Yeah.
like when they're scrolling or on a website, or probably just in general. So yeah, let's talk about your book. What was the impetus for you writing the book?
Yeah. So, I've been studying attention and computer usage for over 20 years. And I've been publishing in academic circles. So people in academia know about my work.
Mhm.
And, from time to time, I had spoken with journalists. And so some people had an idea, in the broader media of what I was doing. But I finally decided it was really time for me to bring my work to a general audience.
Mhm.
And so I took all this academic work that I've been doing for all those years, and my goal was to present it in an easily digestible way so that people would be able to understand it. It is to me a wake-up call for
Mhm.
people to understand that we're at this point in the digital age where we really have to start paying attention to what's happening to us, to the idea that we're getting ourselves exhausted.
Mhm.
Stress is getting out of control, and we're overusing
Mhm.
technology.
Right.
So I want to communicate the message of how important that is to to become aware of what's going on.
And so from what I'm hearing you say, see, I'm trying to use proper communications, right? I've been to some marriage counseling stuff before. From what I'm hearing, or communication, I should just say marriage counseling, communication thing. But from what I'm hearing you say is basically using technology is still a good thing. It's not anti-technology, but we've taken it to the extreme of we're out of balance with technology. I mean, we're overusing it. Is that fair enough to say?
That's exactly right. I know a lot of people are proposing to cut ourselves off from technology. Let's do a digital detox. That's the solution. We can't cut ourselves off from technology. The ship has sailed. We live in a technological world where we get benefits from technology. We can't completely cut ourselves off from it. But, when you talked about restoring balance, that's one of the key points in the book, is that we really have to learn how we can balance an intelligent use of technology with our lives so that we're not getting ourselves stressed.
And so you talk about in the book these 4 myths that are out there around technology. Do you think it would be constructive maybe to take those 4 myths? Because I think when I read through them, they're fairly common things that we all experience. And so if we take it from the 4 myths standpoint, and then kind of because it's kind of like the problem and the antidote. So for like people tuning in, I want them to get value out of their time, if they're still listening, because 45 seconds has expired now. For everyone listening, I want you to, by the end of this podcast, to have a really good sense of kind of what the antidote, or what is balance. What does balance look like in this technology and digital almost overload world that we live in? So if you want to go a different direction, I just thought maybe the myths are kind of the general overall theme. So if you would walk us through kind of what's the first myth around technology, and when we're saying technology, is that what screen time is kind of what I'm thinking of?
Screen time, right, computers and phones.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the most common narratives that we hear is, when we use our devices, let's try to stay as focused for as long as possible, right? It's bad to not be focused. Let's just have continual focus. Well, it takes a lot of mental effort to be focused, and we can't have long, sustained periods of focus in the same way that we can't lift weights nonstop for an extended
for all day,
period
for 8 hours a day.
We can't.
Right?
We just
probably,
absolutely can't do that. We need to pull away. Why can't we have this long, sustained focus? Because people have limited attentional resources. That's the key. So we have a limited capacity. Think of it as a tank. I like to think of it as my personal tank of resources. And you might start the day with a tank pretty full if you've had a good night's sleep. If you haven't had a good night's sleep, your tank is not quite so full. And things we do during the day drain this tank, right? And having long periods of sustained focus is one of the things that can drain it, and can drain us fast. And of course, switching our attention it's actually 47 seconds. Every 47
seconds. Okay.
Can drain us.
I'd even shorten
well.
it. I was giving us one less second because that's where I'm at. I'm so advanced in my illness that I'm at 46 seconds of attention span.
Yeah. So we have to think about how we can introduce really good, important breaks into our day. And, and there are different kinds of attention. Maybe we'll talk about that later. But, achieving balance is to achieve a balance using different kinds of attention, and also achieving balance so that we pull ourselves back before we get exhausted. Allow this tank of attentional resources to replenish, and then we can go back with fresh eyes, and we can actually perform better and do more when we take intentional breaks to kind of reset and restore.
And to make it very grounded, about how long should the average, and I know that's saying we're lumping everybody together, but how much focused time should we be doing at any one given time before it's like, okay, definitely we need some space to kind of just reset or rebalance?
Yeah. So it's really, there are individual differences.
Mhm.
So, I think, for some people, 2 hours of focus time might be the right amount of
Mhm.
time. In fact, we've studied this and we find really about a 2 hour period.
Mhm.
And this actually happens twice a day. This seems to be a good amount of time. Some people have greater capacity. Some people have less capacity. It depends. Like, what do you start your day with? Do you start with a really, good, having had a good quality sleep? Then,
Mhm.
you can focus longer. So there's a lot of things that, fit into the equation.
And so I heard you say 2 hours kind of twice a day. So you've got about 4 hours of focus time. 2 hours, I mean, typically I would think 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the
Yeah.
afternoon, and that's good, right? I doubt there's anybody out there that's productive, and I've heard these stuff like this before, but you're not going to be focused for 8 hours of the day, even though you're
Yeah.
technically, I mean, we've all been trained that a work day is about 8 hours, but if you're doing half of that in focus time, you're high functioning, I guess is the way I would say it, right?
Yes. Yes. That's right. And, it doesn't mean that for the rest of the time, we're just sitting staring
Right.
into the air. But, we can do things, but we can do what I call subordinate work that doesn't require a lot of mental effort.
Mhm.
And the important thing, and maybe we can talk a little
Mhm.
bit more about this in a bit,
Mhm.
because, we can go into depth talking about how we achieve this kind of
Mhm.
balance.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely, definitely. So, okay, so step one is there's a myth that we should be focused all the time, and that's a lie because nobody can do that.
Yeah.
And really, if you can focus for an hour to 2 hours in the morning, an hour to 2 hours in the afternoon, that's really good, and you're going to be probably more productive than if you were trying to stay focused all day because
Yes.
you're getting diminishing returns because your tank's empty. To your point.
Right.
Okay,
So,
perfect.
another myth
Mhm.
is around this notion of flow. And
Mhm.
flow, some people are familiar with.
Mhm.
It's the ideal state of attention where we're so immersed in something that nothing else seems to matter, and we're just not aware of the passage of time. The idea of flow was coined by the psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi,
Mhm.
and he studied a lot of people and wondered, why do people have so much passion when they do rock climbing
Mhm.
or play sports and so on? Now, the myth is that for the typical knowledge worker, and most people who work in some kind of business area are knowledge workers,
Mhm.
or also called information workers.
Mhm.
Flow is just not realistic to achieve when we're doing knowledge work. When I was an artist, I used to get into flow
Mhm.
all the time, regularly.
Mhm.
It's because of the nature of the work. The
Mhm.
nature was inherently creative. There were very few constraints, and I could just go deeply into flow, and I would expect to go into flow. But now that I do knowledge work myself, I do
Mhm.
science, I do research,
Mhm.
uh, I do administrative work. It involves an analytical kind of thinking. And analytical thinking doesn't necessarily get us into flow, right? So, for example, when I'm writing, I have
Mhm.
to think very carefully to get the
Mm.
right kind of language to use. I struggle to find the right words because I want to express myself
Mhm.
exactly. And that's not flow,
Mm.
right? It's an
Mhm.
analytical mindset, but it's deeply rewarding. It's just as rewarding as being in
Mhm.
a state of flow. And it's much more realistic. What's really realistic is to understand when our peak focus times are, which is each person's personal rhythm of
Mhm.
getting into a peak state of focus, and leveraging those times and using those times for doing your hardest work and your most creative work. So
Mm.
that's really what we should be striving for, because flow in knowledge work is you know probably not something you should expect to happen. If you're an artist, if you play music, if you play sports, if you're a dancer, if you do woodworking, these
Mhm.
are kinds of activities that can get one into flow. So sometimes if I'm in a brainstorming session with other people, we might get into a group kind of flow.
Right.
Or people who are coders who do complex coding, they can get into flow. It's the nature of their work, but it's not realistic for everyone in knowledge work to think about this.
You know, during COVID, I had 2 garages, one on each side of the house. And so one of them I set up as a workshop. And so I would work kind of what you're talking about, kind of in this format, right? So a video format for most of the morning, you know, with teams of people and talking through stuff. And then about, you know, noon or 1, I'd go up and have lunch. And then I'd go out to the workshop and build, you know, drawers and, you know, fix this and do shelves. And I just got, you know, so I was really working with my hands. And now I say it, and for me, it was like a happy process because it was both, right? It was kind of, I got the morning kind of thinking and the kind of the work out of the way. And then the ability to go out and see something, I could create something, you know, if I started a project, by the end of the day, I had something that was, I accomplished, right? I'd had something that I could show for my kind of creativity or whatever, right? As I'm building shelves and hanging stuff. So it was, it was a nice balance. And I'm not in that balance now. I guess I'm just becoming aware that I'm not really in that kind of more flowy, I won't say flow, but more flowy balance where it's kind of that physical work and mental work to stay more healthy, I guess. So flow. Okay. So that's the second myth, is that we're going to be in these great flow states at work. If we're working with our minds a lot, and we can still be in states that are like, I know that you put me in front of a spreadsheet doing a deal, I'm going to get into I'm going to have higher energy. Like at the end of that, I'm going to be, it's going to add energy to my system, right? Because that's, I love deal structure. I love looking at numbers and how they flow and kind of how I can do this or that. But that's not necessarily flow state. It's just, I'm enjoying it.
That's right. You're enjoying it. It's fulfilling. But you still have to be analytical, right? To pay attention to the numbers.
Yep. Totally. Yes. All right. What's the third myth?
Yeah. The third myth is that it's the idea that we get distracted and interrupted and we multitask and we blame those primarily on those notifications we get and our lack of discipline.
Right.
And it's a myth because the full story is so much bigger than that. So first of all, people are just as likely to interrupt themselves as to be interrupted from something external, like a notification. We are humans. We interrupt ourselves with some kind of urge or memory to, you know, check the phone or check social media or look up something on the web. But it's also important to understand that we don't use technology in a vacuum. There's so many underlying influences in the world that affect how we use technology. And one of the things which might be surprising is that the very design of the internet itself is designed to distract us. So the node and link structure of the internet maps on so well to how our human minds, human memory is structured in terms of associations. You know, if I say the word cat, you might immediately think of the word dog, right? And when we go on the web and we start reading some content, let's say from a Wikipedia page, and all of a sudden all kinds of associations are happening in our minds. Oh, we click on this link to go somewhere else, and that sets off just a whole firestorm of other associations in our mind. And we see another link, click on that, and before you know it, we're off to the races. And down a rabbit hole.
Sucked back into the matrix. So I've been paying attention lately. So I've been very aware lately when I'm, especially on social media, when I'm on social media, I call it, am I getting hooked? Right? Are there things, is this a hook? Which means, am I going to just be wasting am I just going to be going down someone not even someone, is this taking away from what I want to do right now? Or is this adding, is this actually what I want to do right now? And some of it's entertainment, and I get that. But I've noticed that it's almost like the internet, its job is just to hook me and pull me into its agenda. And it's like, I don't know. It's almost like my nemesis at some point. It's like, no, I came here to look at this, but it's trying to get me to go down all these, right? Because
That's right.
because the internet gets paid, right? The people get paid for getting my attention to look at advertising and marketing and all that fun stuff. So they're feeding me, they're trying to get, and I'm just like, it's almost like a game now where it's like, no, I'm not going to respond to that. Even on Facebook, it's like, I'm not going to respond to that person's thing, because what value is it for me to respond? Am I going to get any value out other than we're going to get it into an argument or something? I mean, it's like, it's kind of a waste of time. It is a waste of time, right? So these internet hooks, I guess.
There are a lot of hooks, and in my book, I describe them as attention traps.
Yes.
And
right.
and there's so many different kinds of traps that we can fall into. And one of them is related to the fourth myth. And the fourth myth is this idea that, there's all these kind of rote and mindless things that we can do on our devices that are just terrible. Let's stay away from them.
Right.
And the short answer is yes. If you play a simple game, something like Wordle, or my favorite game, an anagram game. Yes, absolutely. You can get trapped in it. You can get stuck. We can spend hours. But if you're strategic in how you use this kind of simple rote activity, we can actually use it to help restore us in the following way. So we found that when people are doing this kind of rote activity, it's where you're really engaged in something, but it's really easy. Doesn't involve a lot of stress or
thinking.
Right. It actually makes us happy, and it's calming. It can calm us. And people do all kinds of rote activity, and it doesn't have to be online. People do knitting or gardening, or I talked with one person who likes to just throw a ball against this screen. It's just this rote activity, but it has this kind of calming effect for him. So any kind of activity that doesn't involve a lot of mental effort, which I call rote activity, can have a function for us. Now, of course, the best break to do is to actually go outside and walk in nature. But if you have a few minutes and you just want to de-stress, and if you're strategic to make sure you don't get caught in a trap with it, it's fine to do this kind of mindless activity.
Right. It's just not like anything else, everything in moderation, right? It's not use it at a time that's appropriate. So if there's one, because I do want to get into the AI as well. So in the book, you talked about in our, a little bit of our pre-conversation about really the most important thing you can do for your life is designing your days, designing your life, but designing your days so that you're not getting pulled into these almost anti-focus or, into these areas that it's just not healthy or overusing technology. So kind of how does that work exactly? How do you design your day?
Right. So let me first mention that one of the reasons we get distracted so easily is when we're exhausted, when we're mentally exhausted. So there's a part of our brain that's called executive function, which helps us self-regulate. And when we're cognitively fatigued, our executive function just doesn't work very well, doesn't work as well as it should. And so the key thing is, let's not get ourselves fatigued so that we can actually, have the energy to be able to perform and filter out possible distractions. And we can do that by designing our day. So understanding when your peak focus times are. People have different biological rhythms. So, some people are early types. They peak earlier in the day. Some people are late types. They'll have their peaks later in the day. So understand your chronotype, your biological rhythm,
Mhm.
understand personally when your energy is at its peak, when your mental resources are high. It's not hard to do that. You can keep a diary over a few days and mark down those times when you're exhausted and when you're at your peak, and design your day with significant breaks
Right.
so that you can really not let yourself get drained too much.
Yeah, that's great. And lately I've been struggling with that as well, because I got really good at like time blocking and doing all this stuff. And then over the last couple of months, I've just kind of slid off that. And so now I looked at my day to day and it was like, I mean, if I had attended every meeting I was supposed to, I didn't have a break all day. And finally I was just like, okay, I'm not going to go to that meeting because I need to eat lunch. But I've noticed that I've kind of not done a good job of managing my calendar. So I am feeling a little more stressed, or a little more just hurried or rushed, or
Yeah.
right, because
Yeah.
I'm not being proactive.
Yeah. I mean, there's this idea that we have to pack as much as we possibly can into our day. And, that's just the wrong strategy, because when we do that, we get ourselves exhausted.
Right.
And so what's better is to, allow time for, to replenish. And, working at home, we schedule back-to-back Zoom meetings,
Right.
and there's absolutely no transition to
Right.
go from one meeting to
Into the
another.
now. Yep.
In the physical workplace, at least you can walk. You have a 5-minute walk and your mind can reset. But when we're, on Zoom, there's this tendency to schedule back to
Back
back.
to back.
It's very bad for us.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah. So we don't need to pack as much as we can into our day. Let's think instead in terms of rhythms, in terms of, keeping our resources replenished, and we'll do more. We'll actually be more efficient,
More productive.
and less distracted. Yes.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you for going through that, and thank you for writing that book. I think it's very timely, obviously, and your research is very timely. And next, I want to talk about how the Matrix is going to take over our brains and turn us all into human robots. No, but let's talk about AI. How interesting has this last? Well, it's been a long time coming, but especially the last 4 or 5 months, where they, Chat GPT and all these other products are now coming online. I've played around with it some. I was like, I could write a whole book in like 2 or 3 days. I would just keep asking questions. I mean, it just seems very interesting. It's just very interesting. So from your perspective, I mean, you're in this space professionally. What are you seeing? I guess give us a kind of an overview of what you're seeing in this space.
Yeah, it's really a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because AI can certainly make our lives easier. So it can do some of the boring, simple work that we don't want to do. We can offload it to AI to do. But it is a double-edged sword because, I fear that it can make us dumber. And why is that?
Yeah, why is it? I mean, I'm probably agreeing with you, but why is that?
Yeah, because, when I talked earlier about having to really spend time to articulate if I'm writing something, and I really search for exactly the right words that I need to express myself if I'm writing, AI will suggest words to us. And it's so easy for us to become complacent. And we sit, we're typing, and all of a sudden words are suggested to us. And sure, you just accept that word, even if it's not exactly what you wanted to say. And then, of course, AI can write entire essays for us.
Oh, yeah.
We don't even need to think at the level of the word,
no,
but at the level of an essay. I worry a lot. I'm in the field of education. I worry a lot for students. It's going to be harder and harder for professors to be able to see the difference between what a student has written or what, Chat GPT has written. And of course, a clever student might go back over the chat GP and change some words so that it wouldn't be detected in a, plagiarism
Right.
detection software. But I worry about people becoming lazy. And the chat GPT is doing a lot of the thinking for us. Now, the other argument would be, sure, that's fine. It frees up our time so that we can think of deeper things. Well, I hope that's the case, but I'm not so optimistic. That's what's going to happen.
And so is it my understanding, and please feel free to educate and correct me on anything I'm misspeaking here, but so Chat GPT isn't currently, so we're shooting this in March of 2023. So if anybody's listening, if anyone's out there that's still alive, no, but we're shooting this in March of 2023. And so at this point, at least Chat GPT is not actually hooked up to the net. Is that right?
Well, you can play around with it.
No,
right?
no, I mean,
it's available.
Its brain isn't searching the net. Is that accurate to say, or not?
To my knowledge, it's going to come out pretty soon.
Right. Yes. Yeah, it will. But the stuff that we're playing with now is like the beta version. That's not the power. I mean, because when I originally played around with that, I was like, oh, well, it's just getting answers off the internet. And then I was like, oh, wait a second. This isn't even hooked up to the internet. So this is just a database of words and information that it's been fed. When it goes onto the net, what happens?
Well, so right now, what it states is that it's only using content up through 2021.
Okay.
So it's not even using very, very current,
very relevant
content.
Yeah, right.
As it when it gets hooked up, presumably it's going to be using more content in real time. But the thing to remember is that it's really not intelligent. Right?
It seems like it when I talk to it.
Well, it's reproducing what humans have produced.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
It doesn't have its own brain. It doesn't have its own capabilities of reasoning. It's simply just reproducing what the content that's already out there. And of course, it's able to put it together in a way that makes sense to us.
Well, yeah, because it's us feeding us our information back, right? But it just gets so interesting because I understand it's not just words; it's art. I've got a friend who's an artist, and he's been feeding it stuff and coming up with just amazing artistic, pictures and things. And I'm just like, and they're originals, right? Because they're right.
I mean, that's part of the double-edged sword is that. Sure, maybe people who don't have artistic talent can create things, that they wouldn't ordinarily be able to create. But on the other hand, it is taking away people's agency in being able to create things from scratch. So we're offloading the so-called creativity. I'm not sure I would call it creativity, but we're offloading the work onto the chat GPT to create these images. I would so much rather have humans create the images and create terrible images. I had an art professor who used to say, "Do you have the courage to fail?"
Right.
And I love that. I love that because it's only by doing things that are bad that we can really learn how to be good. And by relying on AI to create these images for us, it doesn't give us a chance to experiment and fail, right? And to learn from our mistakes. We become reliant on this software to do it.
So what eventually do you think computers will even need us for? I'm just, at some point it's just like, so what are we there to carry stuff around for them, like just the maintenance, or it's like it's getting, I mean, very, very. When I grew up, I'm 51. When I grew up, I lived in the country. We had a party line that had 3 lines that connected to a telephone on the wall, and that was technology, right? That was the extent. And today, computers are writing essays, to your point, making art. It's just, I don't know. I'm not trying to wrap this up with a nice bow. I'm just saying it's just very interesting. I'm not able to wrap my mind around where we're headed. It's like this, I don't know exactly where this goes. I don't know that anybody does.
Well, I don't believe that AI is going to take over the world.
Really?
For people. I mean, it's going to become increasingly more a part of the world and a part of our lives, but I don't think it's going to take over the world. People can take over the world, right? The people behind the AI who might control it could take it over, but it's not the AI itself. Right. I think, AI is, as I said, it's good for doing this kind of routine kinds of tasks, boring tasks. But, ultimately, it's not very good at doing decision-making or handling ambiguity, especially doing very complex tasks that require deep thought. As of now, humans are still way better at doing that than AI. And it's going to take a long time for AI to catch up with that. And, hopefully in my lifetime, it won't.
Well, it'll be interesting to see. I've got a 7-year-old and a 3-year-old, and I'm just, when I talk to them, sometimes it's like, yeah, you probably won't, like, even driving a car. My 3-year-old will probably never drive a car. I don't know. Right. I mean, I grew up with a stick shift, right? Nobody knows how to drive a stick shift, right?
I have a stick. I still have a stick.
Oh, do you? Okay. Well,
I love
stick
shifts.
You must have a sports car or something. But other than that, they've become, I was, at a university not too long ago, and they have a 4-year degree in automotive restoration. And they said they actually had to bring in some sticks, so that their students could learn, because their students are 18 or 19 years old. They'd have never seen this thing before, right? But I'm just like, it's just interesting to think, how is this going to, it's just going to be interesting in the next, I think, 10, 15, 20 years to see this thing. What the technology is going so fast, and it's just, everything's going so fast on the technology side, and industrial technologies, information technologies, all these areas. It'll just be interesting to see what the other side looks like. So in one way, I'm very excited, and I'm very like, that's really cool. I love gadgets and seeing stuff. And on the other side, it's kind of like, it wants me to spend more time in nature and learn how to farm and get some chickens, right? Yeah. It's kind of that balance.
When you think about it, the internet is really young, right? It didn't come into widespread popularity until the mid 90s.
Right. Yeah.
Right. It's younger than the fall of the Berlin Wall.
Right.
Right. Yeah, it's younger than when HIV was first discovered. So it's fairly young, and whoa, it's come fast upon us. Right. Yep. And the smartphone was only invented in 2007, the iPhone.
Wow.
And we feel like we've had it
forever, our whole lives, right? Yes, right, yes.
So technology comes fast at us, but the key thing is that we really have to learn how to integrate it into our lives. And what I would love to see for AI is I would really love to see careful attention paid to the ethics behind it. We really have to think about what are the hard ethical questions involved in deploying AI, because the AI comes from data that's produced by people,
right?
And people are fallible, right? And there are bad players, right?
Of course,
and there's also bad players who might use AI in the wrong ways, and will.
Of course, of course. Yeah.
So we like the whole pipeline of AI, from the where the data starts out with, to how AI is built and designed, and how it's deployed, the decisions made to deploy it. We need to give ethical considerations at every stage along the way, and that's the thing that's, to me, the most important with this whole explosion in AI.
Certainly. I did ask it if it was God. It said no. It said it was not. I was like, "Are you God?" I just was going to test it. It said no, but then it gave me some very insightful answers. I was like, "Well, you know what? You're not." But that's pretty clever how you've like fed back some stuff to me. I was like, well, that's, it talked about resiliency. It gave me something back about resiliency. I was like, huh, it's almost like a fortune cookie, right? I read it. I was like, oh, well, that's nice. I want to believe that about myself, that I'm resilient and that I will overcome obstacles and all this stuff. I was like, that's nice. So yes, so it'll be interesting. I think once it does get updated, what that will look like in more real time, and then kind of just where that heads next should be a very interesting. In fact, that's going to be what your next book's about, right? How to integrate AI into our lives, right?
It's coming, right?
Yes.
It's this whole, the floodgates are open, and we just can't stop it.
I agree. So one parting question: if you could impart one thought of wisdom, or say something to all of us, all the humans on the face of the earth, the 8 billion that aren't Chat GPT, if there was one message you think is critical for anybody to know from just your research, your life, what would that message be?
I would say the importance of friendship and social connections. And, I've read about, there's a Harvard study on happiness. And over again, the results show that people who have better social relations, better connections, deeper friendships, are healthier and happier. And, let's not forget human relationships. And, I talked about creativity earlier. It's so fulfilling to be creative with other individuals, to have a creative conversation. That's something that no machine will ever be able to replace.
Right. I agree. Well, thank you, Dr. Gloria Mark. I appreciate your time today. I really appreciated our conversation. It flew by, it seemed, for me. So, and so, yes, if you haven't checked out the book yet, it just came out recently. So Attention Span, it's in stores now. You can buy it on Amazon. You can buy it at any of your major resellers, right? It's everywhere.
I have a copy sitting.
Perfect.
Right
Yeah.
here.
Show us the copy. There we go. Attention Span. Love it. So we'll know that it's yellow when you go looking for it. But love it. Thank you so much for coming on, and you are always welcome back. You're a friend of the show, so anytime you'd like to come back and visit about your work, what you're doing, what you're up to, or anything that you're noticing that you think you'd like to share with others, please feel free to come back on the show.
Okay, thank you so much for having me.
Of course, it was a pleasure. Thank you for being a part of the BriteVibe podcast. For more information, go to britevibe.com. That's BRITE Vibe, VIBE.com. Thank you for listening.